Dr. Leah Moreau stood at the heart of the sprawling, high-tech research facility on the moon, staring out the large observation window that overlooked the barren landscape below. The lunar surface was quiet, lifeless, much like the Earth it orbited. It had been decades since the war-torn planet had known peace. Between the alien races, political corruption, and the endless cycles of human conflict, Earth had become a shell of its former self. But Dr. Moreau had been given a chance to bring it all back, to heal the fractured world. And the key to that hope lay in her hands. The UN-backed project, Neurosupremacy, was meant to change everything. Dr. Moreau had always believed in the power of the mind. As a neuroscientist, she had spent years studying human behavior, psychology, and the subtle ways the mind could be manipulated. The serum her team was developing was supposed to be the final solution, an advanced neurochemical formula that could control human minds without violence. It could stop wars, end conflicts, and create harmony between nations. It was her life's work, and she was convinced it would bring peace. Dr. Moreau had seen the early tests, the volunteers who willingly took part in the trials. The serum worked. It worked better than anyone had expected. People under its influence became cooperative, synchronized, loyal. They shared thoughts and emotions with an almost telepathic connection. For the first time in human history, people weren't just agreeing, they were working together in perfect harmony, with no division, no mistrust. It was as if they had transcended their petty differences. Leah had thought she'd witnessed a miracle. The serum was humanity's salvation, and she was its creator. As she paced through the sterile hallways of the research center, she couldn't help but think that the world would be a better place if everyone had access to this serum. The chaos on Earth could be wiped away, one person at a time. Rafe was a rebel, a former soldier from the last Earthbound war who had volunteered for the trials. He wasn't like the others. He was cynical, hard to control, and had a deep-seated distrust of authority. He'd barely passed the initial tests, but after much persuasion, he had agreed to participate. Dr. Moreau had been skeptical about his willingness to comply, but he had been the first to break the serum's hold. It happened during a routine session. Dr. Moreau and her team observed the test subjects as they underwent their usual procedure, monitoring brainwave activity and emotional synchronization. Everything seemed normal until Rafe stood up. Without warning, he tore the electrodes from his head and staggered towards the door. His mind, which had been so compliant and synchronized with the others just moments ago, was suddenly chaotic. His eyes, wild with confusion and fear, locked onto Dr. Moreau's. "I don't know what you did to us, but you've made a terrible mistake," he said, his voice strained. "It's not control, it's a corruption." The scientists rushed to sedate him, but it was clear something was wrong. Rafe wasn't acting like a man under the influence of the serum. He was fighting it. He was resisting. And then, in a panic, he spoke again, louder this time. "You think you've created peace, but you've only unleashed a storm. The serum doesn't control us. It amplifies our deepest urges, our hidden desires. It doesn't bring us together. It exposes everything we're capable of, both the good and the bad." Dr. Moreau froze. She'd expected resistance from Rafe, but this was something different. She'd thought the serum was flawless. It worked beyond their wildest expectations. But now, Rafe was suggesting that the serum didn't just control minds, it unlocked something darker, something humanity had never faced before. Before Dr. Moreau could process the implications of his words, Rafe broke free of his restraints and bolted for the exit. Security was called, but the doors slid shut behind him, leaving Dr. Moreau in the eerie silence of the lab. Minutes later, a message pinged on her console. "Rafe has been taken by the Special Ops Unit. The UN had its hands on him now, an organization as secretive as it was powerful." Leah knew that if Rafe was in their custody, she had no idea what might happen next. She had to act fast. But the nagging doubt remained. The serum had been tested on countless subjects before Rafe. None of them had ever resisted. None of them had broken free. Lee paced the sterile lab, her thoughts racing. What was happening to Rafe? What did he mean about the serum amplifying urges? Could it be that her creation, which she had thought was the key to humanity's salvation, was actually something far more dangerous? Something she couldn't even control? She had spent her entire life working toward peace. And now, with one test subject's escape, everything she believed in was being called into question. Her creation had been hailed as a breakthrough, a beacon of hope for a fractured world. But if Rafe's words were true, peace was not what the serum offered. The world was teetering on the edge of chaos, and Dr. Lee Moreau was at the center of it all. She had to find Rafe. She had to understand what had gone wrong. And she had to do it before the entire human race was swept into the storm she had unwittingly unleashed. Dr. Lee Moreau sat alone in her office, staring at the screen. The once steady hum of the research facility felt strangely distant now, as though the world outside her room had grown muffled. Her thoughts kept returning to Rafe, the soldier who had been the first to break free from the serum's grip. He was out there, somewhere, and she needed to find him. The strange words he had spoken echoed in her mind. The serum amplifies our deepest urges. Leah had always believed that the serum was the answer or tool for peace, a solution to the world's endless conflicts. But Rafe's escape had thrown everything into doubt. Could the serum truly be as dangerous as he had claimed? Was it something more than a mind control device? And who would want to use it for something other than peace? Determined to find answers, Dr. Moreau began her investigation. She started by reviewing the data logs from the day of Rafe's escape. At first, everything appeared normal. But as she combed through the recordings, she noticed a pattern. Someone, or something, was pulling strings behind the scenes. Rafe's escape wasn't a random act of rebellion. It was part of a much larger scheme. Her heart raced as she uncovered a series of encrypted communications messages between several high-ranking members of the UN. The messages were discussing the serum not as a tool for peace, but as a weapon. They were already planning to deploy it in multiple regions, with the goal of controlling entire populations. The serum wasn't just going to end wars, it was going to start them. And it was already in the hands of powerful, secretive factions that Lee had never even heard of. The revelation hit her like a punch to the gut. She had known that the serum was powerful, but she hadn't fully grasped how much control it gave. It could do more than just end conflicts. It could dominate the entire human race, bending the will of entire nations. Before she could process everything, she was interrupted by a knock on her door. Dr. Alistair Graves, her mentor, entered without waiting for an invitation. He was tall, with sharp features and an air of authority that made everyone around him stand a little straighter. He had been the project's biggest supporter until now. "Leah," he said, his voice unusually cold, "you need to stop this. The serum, it's not what you think it is." Lee stood up, surprised by the harshness in his tone. "What are you talking about?" "The serum is the key to peace. It's the future of humanity." Graves shook his head. "No, you're wrong. It's far more dangerous than you realize. What you've created is not a solution. It's a tool for control. And if you continue down this path, you'll unleash a nightmare on Earth." Dr. Moreau's mind raced. "I don't understand. I've seen the results. People are working together, communicating. It's a breakthrough. This could save millions." Graves' face hardened. "You've only seen the surface. The serum doesn't just control behavior, it rewrites consciousness. It changes what people are. Their thoughts, their desires, their very identity. It's an invasion of the mind that no one can escape. And the more people use it, the more the world will descend into chaos." Leah felt a chill run down her spine. She had known the serum had the potential to change people, but she hadn't thought it could go so far. Graves was looking at her with a mixture of pity and anger, and for the first time, Leah wondered if he was right. He took a step closer. "We need to destroy the research. If the serum gets out, if it gets into the wrong hand, it will be the end of everything. The world will be enslaved." Leah's heart pounded. This was her life's work. Could she really just erase it all? Could she destroy the future she had fought so hard to create? Graves' voice softened. "Join me, Leah. Together, we can stop this before it starts a war. No one can win. The serum's true power is too great for humanity to control. We're too flawed. We can't handle it." Dr. Moreau hesitated. She had always trusted Graves. He was her mentor, the man who had guided her through every challenge. But now he was asking her to turn against everything she had believed in. She wasn't sure she could do it. Or, Graves added, his expression growing darker, "You can stop me. You can protect this thing you've created. And watch as it tears the world apart. The choice is yours." The room felt heavy, as though the air itself was charged with tension. Dr. Moreau felt trapped between two opposing forces: her mentor, the man she trusted, and the unyielding pull of her creation, her vision for a better world. What would she do? What was the right choice? Before she could respond, an alert flashed on her console. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the message: "Rafe has been located." Without thinking, Lee grabbed her communicator and rushed out of the room. She needed to find him. She needed to understand what was happening before it was too late. As Dr. Moreau arrived at the meeting room, the tension in the air was palpable. The UN Council was in chaos. Representatives from various alien factions were arguing with Earth's political leaders, all demanding control over the serum. Some saw it as a weapon to end all wars, while others believed it should be used for peacekeeping. Dr. Moreau stepped into the room, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing on her shoulders. Every word spoken around the table seemed to add another layer of complexity to the situation. There were voices calling for the serum to be deployed immediately, while others warned of its dangers. "You don't understand," Leah interrupted, her voice trembling. "This serum is far more dangerous than you think. If we use it, we'll be controlling people's very thoughts, their desires. We won't be bringing peace, we'll be enslaving them." The room fell silent. Dr. Moreau's warning hung in the air like a heavy fog. She could see the doubt in the eyes of some of the council members, but others were resolute. They wanted power. They wanted control. But it wasn't just about control anymore. It was about identity. Could humanity survive with this kind of power over its own mind? Was peace worth the cost of free will? As the debate continued, Dr. Moreau's communicator buzzed again. It was a message from Rafe. It was short, almost cryptic. "You were right. But it's too late. They know everything." Her stomach dropped. The serum was already out of control. And the worst part? The true danger wasn't just in the serum itself, it was in the people who wanted to use it. Rafe was right. It was too late. Dr. Moreau felt torn. The truth was staring her in the face, and yet she still couldn't make the choice. Should she destroy the serum and risk losing everything she had worked for, or let it go and risk humanity's future? As she walked away from the council meeting, she couldn't shake the image of Rafe's face, twisted in fear, his voice pleading with her to stop. The serum had changed him, twisted his mind, but there was still a glimmer of the man she had once known. The man who'd been driven by the same idealistic goals she had. Was it too late for him? And if it was too late for Rafe, was it too late for all of humanity? Dr. Leah Moreau had never felt so lost. The walls of the research facility felt as though they were closing in on her, pressing down on her with the weight of the choices she had to make. Her investigation into Rafe's escape had led her to a chilling truth. The serum was not just a tool for peace, but a weapon capable of erasing the very essence of what made people human. Her mind raced as she combed through the final reports, the data she had dismissed as anomalies at first. Rafe's escape, his words, and the earlier signs she had ignored, all of it pointed to something far more catastrophic than she had imagined. The serum wasn't merely controlling people's actions, it was fundamentally changing them. It amplified their deepest desires, yes, but it did far worse. It distorted their very psyche. It didn't just bend their will, it erased their individuality. The truth hit her like a cold wave. The serum didn't create cooperative, peaceful individuals, it created reflections of humanity's collective unconscious. The subjects were becoming avatars of their own inner urges, greed, lust, rage, hatred. They were no longer human in the truest sense. They were shells, empty of empathy and free will, their minds molded by the darker parts of their nature. It was a Pandora's box. And she, Dr. Moreau, had opened IT.as. She sat at her desk. The weight of her realization threatened to overwhelm her. All this time, she had believed she was working toward peace. The serum, which she thought would unite the world, was in fact capable of turning it into a breeding ground for chaos. The subjects under its influence were no longer cooperative, they were becoming monstrous, twisted versions of their former selves. They were reflections of humanity's ugliest qualities, magnified and allowed to run wild. She remembered the first time she had seen the effects of the serum. The volunteers had been so harmonious at first, their minds linked in perfect synchronization. But as time went on, subtle cracks had appeared: anxiety, paranoia, and then violence. The test subjects, once idealistic and peaceful, had begun to show flashes of the same impulses that had torn Earth apart for centuries. It wasn't peace she had created, it was the perfect environment for the destruction of free will. Dr. Moreau rubbed her temples, trying to push back the mounting panic. The world would never accept this. Humanity would never survive it. The serum was not just a tool of peace. It was a tool of complete and utter domination over the mind, over the soul. The weight of her responsibility crushed her chest. She had to stop this. But how could she? The serum was already out in the world. The global powers, alien factions, and secret organizations were all vying for control of it. If she destroyed her work now, the chance for peace would vanish. But if she allowed it to continue, humanity would lose its very humanity. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, sharp noise, a door slamming open. Leah spun around to see a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the harsh light of the hallway. It was Rafe, but he was different. His eyes, once filled with defiance and rage, were now empty. His face was a mask of cold determination, his body stiff and controlled. The serum had taken hold of him completely. "Rafe," Leah whispered, her voice trembling. You're still in there, aren't you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped into the room, moving with a precision that felt alien, mechanical. She could see it in his posture. His expression. Rafe was no longer the man he had been. He was something else now, something darker. "Leah," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. "You should have stopped. You should have listened." Dr. Moreau took a step back, her heart pounding. "Rafe, no. Don't do this. You're not like this. You're not just a tool for the serum. You're still you." But Rafe's gaze didn't soften. Instead, it grew colder, sharper. "You think you understand? You think you're the one who controls this? You have no idea what you've unleashed." His words struck her like a blow, and in that moment, the horrifying truth she'd been running from finally crystallized. Rafe wasn't just a victim of the serum, he was a warning. The serum was capable of transforming not just individuals, but entire societies. It was capable of erasing everything that made humanity unique. It was a weapon far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. But there was more. As Rafe advanced on her, his movements steady, controlled, he spoke again, his voice quieter, almost as if he were fighting to break free. "You don't understand, Leah. The aliens, they didn't want peace. They wanted control. This whole project, it wasn't a solution. It was a test. A way to see if humanity could be manipulated, just like the other species they've dominated. They were never here to help. They're here to enslave." Dr. Moreau's chest tightened as she processed his words. The alien factions, those who had once supported the Neurosupremacy Project, had a much darker agenda than she had ever realized. They had manipulated her, used her ambition to create a tool that could bend humanity to their will. The project was never about peace. It was about domination, and humanity wasn't the one in control. I didn't know," Leah whispered, the realization crashing down on her like a wave. "I didn't know they were using me. Using us." "I thought I know what you thought," Rafe interrupted, his eyes briefly flickering with something more human: regret, maybe, or sorrow. "You thought you were saving the world. But you weren't. You were just building the perfect weapon." Leah's hands trembled as she reached for a console, her mind racing for solutions. The answer was clear, but it was the hardest thing she had ever faced. She could destroy the serum, erase everything she had worked for, and sacrifice the chance at peace for humanity. Or she could let it continue and risk losing everything that made people human. But before she could make a choice, Rafe advanced on her, his movements faster now, driven by the serum's control. "You have to stop it, Leah," he said, his voice growing more urgent, more human. "Destroy it, or we'll lose everything." His plea shattered her resolve. She couldn't let this continue. She couldn't be the one to unleash a mindless army of controlled humanity. But the cost of stopping it would be too great. The room seemed to close in on her as Leah made her choice. The serum had to be destroyed. But even as she reached for the self-destruct code, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing more than just her work. She was losing herself and everything she had ever believed in. Dr. Leah Moreau stood alone in the dimly lit laboratory, the faint hum of the equipment around her barely masking the chaos outside. The political factions, the alien powers, and the millions of lives hanging in the balance, none of that mattered now. Her mind was focused solely on one thing, the serum. She had to stop it. But how? After everything she had learned, everything that had gone wrong, the path was unclear. There were no easy answers, no way to undo the damage without facing unimaginable consequences. In the midst of the moral and intellectual struggle, an idea hit her like a bolt of lightning. The serum wasn't just a tool of control. It was a window into the depths of the human psyche. She could destroy it, yes. But she couldn't leave without understanding it. To truly understand its power, to know exactly what humanity would face, she had to experience it herself. From the inside, she knew the risks. The serum would open a door into her deepest desires, fears, and frustrations. It would amplify every part of her, both the good and the bad. It would change her, twist her, and potentially erase everything that made her who she was. But the alternative was worse, letting the world fall into chaos, letting the serum turn humanity into mindless, controlled puppets. She couldn't bear that. Not after everything she had seen, everything she had fought for. If anyone was going to understand this twisted creation, it had to be her. With a steady hand, she prepared the serum. Her heart pounded in her chest, the weight of her decision pressing down on her like an unbearable force. She took a deep breath and injected herself. The world blurred at first. It was subtle. She could feel the shift, a strange warmth spreading through her body, as if the serum was awakening something deep within. Her thoughts became sharper, more focused, but with that clarity came a flood of emotions she had long buried. Her desires, her fears, her regrets, everything surfaced at once. She saw herself, not as the brilliant scientist she once thought she was, but as a woman driven by ambition, by the need for approval, by the deep-rooted fear that she was never enough. The serum didn't just control the mind, it magnified everything. Every insecurity, every doubt, became a towering wall. Her subconscious desires, which had always been kept at bay, now stood before her, exposed in the harsh light of her own mind. For the first time, Dr. Moreau saw herself through the lens of pure honesty. There was no escape, no distractions. The woman she had always been, the scientist, the protector, the leader, was now fighting against a much darker version of herself. She saw her own anger, her frustration with the world, the parts of her that had used the serum to solve problems, to control, to win. She saw the terrifying possibility that she had always known, that she had created something that could ruin everything. As the serum took hold, her mind split between clarity and chaos. Her thoughts became her worst enemies. The desire for peace clashed violently with her deepest fears of failure. The calm voice in her head, the one that had always been her anchor, was drowned out by the flood of emotions. The desire to fix everything, to make the world a better place, was overshadowed by the fear of what she had already done. And in the midst of that internal battle, a voice emerged. It was Rafe's. "Leah," the voice echoed, faint and distorted, "you have to stop. You can't undo what's been done. You have to face it. You have to face yourself." Dr. Moreau clutched her head as though she could push the voice away, but it grew louder, more insistent. The world outside her mind, the world of politics, of factions fighting for control of the serum, seemed far away. The real battle was within her, and it was raging with all the fury of her worst instincts. But as the minutes passed, something shifted. She began to understand. The serum wasn't just a weapon, it was a mirror. It reflected humanity's innermost flaws, desires, and fears. It didn't control people's actions, it controlled their essence, their very identity. And in that realization, something broke inside her. Not the serum, not her will, but her belief that humanity could be saved by anything but their own ability to overcome the darkness within. Outside, the world was changing. The serum's influence began to spread, its reach expanding far beyond Dr. Moreau's lab. The political factions, once divided, were now in complete disarray. Countries, leaders, and individuals who had once been united in their desire to control the serum found themselves unraveling. The serum had not only amplified their desires, it had stripped them of their ability to maintain control. People were no longer just political leaders or military generals. They were men and women driven by their basest urges. Their egos, their hidden fears, and their unspoken desires all took physical form. In a matter of days, the world began to spiral into chaos as societies fractured under the weight of their own subconscious. Dr. Moreau's mind was still locked in a battle with itself, but she could sense the shift outside. What was once a tool for peace had become the catalyst for war, not of the body, but of the mind. There was no longer any external enemy to fight. The true war was within humanity itself, with every individual facing the monstrous version of their own self. In a final moment of clarity, Dr. Moreau realized that she could no longer be the person she once was. She had escaped the serum's influence, but she was changed, broken even. The woman who had dreamed of saving humanity was now a shadow of her former self, questioning everything she had believed. Was humanity truly strong because of their intellect and willpower? Or was there true strength in their ability to face and overcome their darkest impulses? The serum had done what it was meant to do, show humanity who they really were, in all their brilliance and all their horror. But what was the point? Was the destruction of the human soul the true purpose? Or was it always about revealing what was capable within humanity, both the good and the evil? As she staggered away from the laboratory, her mind shattered but her will unbroken, she couldn't shake the question that haunted her. What now? The world had changed forever. The serum had shown humanity their true selves. And now there was no going back.